Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions Deep Dive TV Podcast with my co-host Stacie here to talk about Under the Dome, Season 1, Episode 4, titled Outbreak. The episode's description reads as follows. The town suffers from an outbreak of meningitis. Julia learns that Bill and Barbie are connected to her missing husband. Angie struggles to escape the bomb shelter. The episode was written by Peter Galloway, 6 episodes in total over 3 seasons for him, based on a book by Stephen King, and the episode was directed by Carrie Scolwin. 2 episodes on this series in total, 58 credits in total, including 5 episodes of Handmaid's Tale. Before we go any further, I'll tell you a couple things. This is This is not a spoiler review podcast. So if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go check it out and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on the platforms of this podcast, now be the one, please follow. And feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, and subscribe to our channel. All right, so Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode?
We're jumping right in?
Yes.
No shout-outs?
Nope. Nobody's commented on any of these Under the Dome videos.
Well, I have a shout-out.
You do? Okay.
Not related to Under the Dome, but it's as good a place as any to mention it. From...
Oh, yes, of course,
won a Saturn Award this year.
Yep.
Last week for Best Horror Series.
Yes, this is a
And
criminally...
that's super exciting
Yes.
for our fandom.
It does actually relate to Under the Dome.
A little bit.
Because Jack Bender is,
it relates better than anything else we were going to mention it in.
Yeah, I was wondering if we were going to do a separate podcast on that. I don't think so, just for that one video. But yeah, this is a much deserved win. It definitely has deserved more recognition over the past 3 seasons. It is a criminally underrated show, and congratulations to From.
Yeah, it's super exciting that they finally got some recognition.
Yes.
Last year they were nominated, and the categories they were nominated from weren't even announced during the presentation.
Right, yeah.
Never mind, they didn't win anything. None of
Right.
our shows last year won anything. It was really kind of a letdown to watch. But this year, they were there. The 3 J's were there, along with Harold and Elizabeth Saunders and Cliff Saunders.
Yep.
Super exciting.
Yes.
Super amazing.
Yep.
And, you can tell that From is one of these shows that's just going to keep growing in cult popularity.
I told you, I had a feeling that it was time for this series to get recognition, and it did. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, so yes, Jack Bender being one of those J's.
Yes.
Of course. And the other thing I wanted to mention, today, the day we're recording this, not the day it's releasing, so a couple days ago for the rest of y'all, was the 1-year anniversary of our 100th episode.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Which mostly was about us meeting Scott Bakula.
Mm-hmm.
But I did re-listen to that episode today, and I shared it out. And one thing I wanted to mention that we said in that episode, because I thought it was really funny, is 1 year ago we said, and eventually we're going to talk about Under the Dome again.
Really?
So a whole nother year passed, but here we are. We're finally back to this series.
That is pretty funny. Yeah, and we're going back to talk about season 1. We were at that point talking about doing season 2.
Yeah, and then, it wasn't going to happen.
No.
Until we went back and really gave these episodes their due justice.
Absolutely.
Corn Production style.
Right.
So, Outbreak. I enjoyed this episode. I feel like it was a much more concise story than we got last week. Being, episode 3. Yeah, I feel like this is another episode where, we're getting good stuff with the characters.
Right.
And there's some growth, and as an audience, you're learning new things, and you're still kind of like, ooh, what's going to happen next?
Right. All right, so this episode crystallizes 2 things for me. One, and it is a decent episode, but it also goes back to my problems with even the structure of season one, how they structured their stories and the episodes, in the fact that it was problem of the week kind of deal, where you had the subplots in the background, but you had the problem of the week that you deal with, which is kind of odd for a miniseries that's only supposed to be 1 season. And this is only 4 episodes in, so I'm kind of very curious as to when they changed their mind as to continue on and do more seasons. But yeah, this episode is the least example of what I'm talking about here. This episode is fine. But next week, you have the military wants to blow everybody up, and then that problem is over by the end of the episode. And then the worst example of it is the water crisis episode, where there's a whole riot and everything is going nuts, and by the end of the episode, everything is fine. Like that was just silly and ridiculous to me. I think that all those problems should have been like spread out across the season, not just like done in one episode. Now, to be fair, there are some consequences to the whole water crisis thing that do spread out with the whole Allie situation. But still, I think that should have been like a series-long problem rather than just like, an episode and you're done. The other thing, I'm starting to see exactly where my problems, where they took Junior as a character goes. I think up to this point, everything they've done with the character actually makes sense. Like when they handed over the badge to him, it made him seem like, okay, maybe this is a good guy to the town.
Right.
That makes perfect sense to me.
I really liked what they did with Junior in this episode and showing us, the audience, exactly how people are kind of tricked into thinking he's a good guy.
The problem comes with the later seasons. Well, first, there's still some issues I have in this season regarding Angie and Junior's relationship. Sure. But all in all, the season 1 arc for Junior makes complete sense, But I think they made a mistake, a huge one, in basically trying to make him a good guy in season 2. They basically abandoned the whole. He should have been an antagonist throughout the entire series.
Yeah,
like maybe someone that fools people into thinking he's a good guy, but is actually acting at counter purposes to the rest of them, and is actually a psychopath. And then, so basically, in season 2, they make him into a good guy. Season 3, his arc is completely incoherent. I would even argue that he's only around as a character for, like, maybe 2 episodes, and then it's not him anymore.
Right.
So it's pointless. But, I think when we get to this episode, I watch this episode, I realize, okay, I think that is actually what my problem is. And some of the other stuff that I've already mentioned with the whole, Angie stuff that I talked about last week.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, at this point, it still feels like it's going to be a great story.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like, you still have these really high hopes that all of this character development is going to, like, explode into something beautiful to watch.
Right, yeah.
And it doesn't.
No, unfortunately.
But at this moment, it still feels like that's where it's going.
Right.
So, again, we have no Dodie in this episode. We also have no Andrew Grinnell, no Rose, no Ben.
That's interesting.
We do have a return of a couple recurring characters, including Ollie Dinsmore. Peter Shumway gets an appearance in this episode.
Yep.
And not his last. He's actually in a couple more episodes, which is funny since he's been dead since before the series started.
Right.
And Lester Coggins has an appearance in this episode.
Yes.
As well as we meet one new recurring character.
Yep.
Nurse Adams. She's going to be in a total of 5 episodes, and this is her first.
Okay. Anything else to say before diving in?
And I will talk about her when we meet her, and a couple of one-off characters.
All right.
But, let's jump into the scene by scene.
All right, so the episode begins with Julia looking at the map that she discovered last episode. Barbie comes down the stairs and says, "Good morning," and she's acting all suspicious of him. He does not pick up on this at all. But Barbie ends up saying he'll catch a ride with her to the radio station, which is interesting because last episode, he was avoiding Phil. So I'm not sure why he wants to go to the radio station.
He just wanted to ride into town.
Okay. So he's not specifically going to the radio station. He just wants to ride into town?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure where he's going or what he's doing, honestly. Now, one important thing in this scene is we learn she has a headache. And she takes prescription meds for her headache, but her prescription is empty.
Ooh.
And so we learned that Dee's pharmacy is closed, which is going to be important for, like you said, the subject of the week.
Right. I would also argue that they do kind of continue that problem into future episodes. It is relevant to the character of Alice, for instance, that they're running out of drugs.
Right.
So that's actually something, to be fair, does continue on throughout the rest of the season.
Right, but specifically the plot point that the pharmacy is just closed.
Right.
We learned that right here.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the military, meanwhile, is packing up. The assembled crowd is not happy, which is Allie, for instance. Allie is there, and he's asking why the military is supposed to protect them. Linda is starting to lose control of the crowd, takes out a gun, and then Lester Coggins comes in and offers a bunch of nonsense. I don't even know what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's like preaching a sermon, and he's kind of saying, I guess, that it's God's will that the dome is here, and they're all going to die.
Right. Well, Linda doesn't think this is helping, and another person who doesn't think that's helping at all is Jim, who comes in to step in, and he manages to get the crowd to disperse. He starts to say, hey, Linda, you almost lost it there. And Linda isn't looking well, and then she collapses into Barbie and Jim's arms.
Yep.
Angie is trying to cut her way out. Junior comes downstairs with new clothes, including a dress for Junior prom. That still fits her. That's pretty impressive.
It's only like a year or two later. Well, he's going back to college, so it's 2 years later.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's
But, I mean, no, most people don't change that much in that time.
No? Okay. So she offers to wear it. She turns around and takes the opportunity to stab him with scissors literally in the back.
Remember the scissors that she stole from the first aid kit
Yep.
last episode? Yeah, that's what I have in my notes. She stabs him in the back, literally.
Unfortunately, her attempt fails, and she just ends up locked up even further. And, any progress that she was making in fooling Junior into thinking that she might be getting better is over with.
Yeah, and he ends up with a cut on his hand out of this ordeal.
So Julia happens upon her husband's car, I guess following the map.
Oh, yeah, I was wrong. Okay, so last week I said that circled on the map was the location of the cabin.
Right.
I was wrong.
Right, no.
My memory skipped this whole bit. The location that was circled was a trailer park that leads her to, so she goes to this location on the map, it's a trailer park, where she sees her husband's car. And then we have Neighbor. Neighbor comes out. Neighbor is played by Dane Northcutt. He was in one episode of Vampire Diaries, one episode of Revolution. And he recognizes Julia, and he knows that she's been on the radio working with Phil.
He basically assumes that that's who she's looking for.
She's here to see Phil because
Yeah.
she happens to be at Phil's trailer. Now, she has no idea. And he's like, what you looking for Phil for?
Right.
And she's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, that's Phil's car. And she's like, no, that's my husband's car.
Right.
So she pounds on Phil's trailer.
And then he comes out and said that Peter sold him the car when she asked, what are you doing with my husband's car? And then he collapses. He's not looking too good himself.
Yeah, we're not doing good.
No.
That's the gist here. People are not doing good.
Alice and Caroline are at the hospital with Joe and Nori to get them checked out because of their seizures. They can only do 2 out of the 3 tests here. The rest can be done outside the dome. And Alice basically takes charge. And Joe is very impressed by Alice and then stops to ask Junior about Angie, who he says he saw a couple of nights, which is technically not a lie. But he lies and says he doesn't know where she is.
Yeah, so Joe's finally noticing, like, hey, I haven't seen my sister.
Yeah.
Have you seen her? Because, he knows they were kind of sort of dating.
Yeah. And it's...
And we know she's in the dome because
Right.
he's seen her since then.
Right.
But not after that.
And the funny thing is, he's here because he had gotten injured by
Yes, he's
Angie.
here getting his hand wrapped up.
Right.
So it was in this scene that we did meet Nurse Adams. She's played by Crystal Martinez. She was in one episode of Fear the Walking Dead, the Althea tapes. That's one of the web series. She was in one episode of Revolution and one episode of In Plain Sight.
All right. So...
And the reason that Alice is taking charge, of course, is because she is a physician. She is a psychiatrist, but she says she did do residency in medicine. And basically, she's the only doctor in town. There's no doctors under the dome except for her. And she's not even a medical doctor. She just has a little bit of experience with it.
That is not a very good situation now, is it?
No, it's not.
So Linda is brought in by Barbie and Jim. Jim notices Junior's hand much quicker than he noticed his other injuries in the last episode. More people are coming in, and it's clear that something bad is happening as Phil is also brought in. Angie, meanwhile, tries to communicate through a vent, but only succeeds in breaking a pipe, which causes her to fall backwards and get knocked unconscious while water is leaking out rather quickly. And we have our credits, and that's 5 minutes into the episode, which is quicker, but...
And that's Angie's story. She's going to spend the rest of the episode with a bunker filling with water.
Yes. Good times, good times. Alice is getting blood from Nori. Nori isn't impressed with her blood-getting abilities. Joe is wearing a fancy contraption, which Alice says does something.
It's an EEG test they're doing on him.
This leads to more flirting, and Alice is starting to get annoyed with this and says, like, not now. She's like, Nori, not now, but she doesn't say anything to Joe, who's also...
Well, that's not her kid.
Yeah, I guess so. So Alice is taken away to do some doctoring stuff because, things are happening in this hospital.
So there's no doctors. They're like, you're it. Congratulations, you're hired. We have an entire waiting room full of patients.
I'm sure that Alice was reconsidering her decision to come to this hospital.
So she asked them. She asks the nurse for mask and gloves, and Nurse Adams tells her they're out of both.
Right.
But they do have antibiotics.
That's good news. Barbie is working with Junior. Julia takes this moment to confront him, asking how he knows Phil. And Barbie denies knowing him, but she whips out a map, and he's like, "Oh, you were going through my stuff?" And this is classic deflection. He's been caught out in something, and he's like, "Ooh, you were going through my stuff." Well, which is the worst sin here? But anyway.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
he doesn't want to tell her what he was really doing, obviously.
Right.
But he also doesn't want to tell her, like, why he was there in the first place, either.
She accuses him of lying about things, but he ends up shutting her down. And then, as he's walking away, Julia starts to exhibit symptoms. Uh-oh. Linda is now bunking with her old teacher, Mrs. Moore, played by Celia Watson.
Celia Weston.
Yeah. 75 credits for her, including You Are Cordially Invited, 5 episodes of Modern Family, 5 episodes of American Horror Story, and I knew you were going to ask, so I looked it up, and this was the Freak Show season. And she is not doing very well.
She was also in Legally Blonde with Reese Witherspoon as well.
Yes, yep.
I watched You're Cordially Invited last week.
I know. That's actually why I made note of that.
It just came out. I watched it the day it came out, and then the day after I watched it is when I'm taking these notes, and I go, "Oh yeah, that's how I recognized her."
So I guess what you're saying here is we have to cover that movie now.
Well, it's a little out of our wheelhouse. It can go on the back burner.
Okay.
Eventually, we'll be struggling for more things we want to cover.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not timey-wimey or holiday. It's just a rom-com.
Right. Yeah. All right.
But it was funny. I enjoyed it.
So Linda was not a good student, apparently. Yeah. And that's what we learned from this scene. Jim is told by Alice that the infection could be meningitis, and they have an epidemic going out, and suddenly this becomes basically a House episode in House MD.
It kind of does, yeah. Now, Barbie says that his cousin had meningitis. It was really bad. Basically, if you don't get treated right away, you're going to die, is what we're told. I'm
not totally sure that's accurate, the way this is depicted here, but, since when in any show is anything medical really depicted the way it actually is? Alice says there isn't enough antibiotics to treat everyone. And Alice is also saying anyone leaving could spread it. As she says, she'll get him a list of things that she needs. And she's basically implying that everybody needs to stay here without actually saying it.
She's saying we need to quarantine this hospital. Right. Now we learn that Alice's family, Junior, and Barbie have all been vaccinated. So technically they can leave. They're not going to spread it.
I didn't realize that vaccination against meningitis was actually a thing.
I'm sure you were, because you went to college.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it's usually a requirement,
Gotcha.
which is why they said Barbie had it done, because he's in college. Not Barbie, Junior had it done in college. It's the test. Not the test. It's the one that you do, and then you get a bump in your skin, and then you gotta go back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
I'm sure you've had it.
So, in other words, I won't catch meningitis?
In theory.
Okay.
But people who haven't gone through that, as in you didn't go to college or one place that requires that, probably haven't had it. The reason Alice's family had it is because they went out of the country and it was required for that.
Gotcha.
But most of the town, this is a hick town, they're just kind of, farmers and people, and they haven't had this done.
Mm-hmm. So Jim grabs a shotgun and tasks Junior with keeping everyone there. And Junior goes inside and says, "No one leaves," while pointing a gun at them. Now, I'm not sure about this tactic. Why did he need to do that right at that moment when nobody was attempting to leave?
Right. So here's what should have happened. First, Jim, who people listen to, should have went in, calmly explained to everybody that they need a quarantine.
Right. And
told them he's putting Junior in charge of the door.
Yeah.
Somebody they listen to.
Right.
Jim. And then, maybe when Junior goes in, just holding the gun up like it's a freaking hostage situation is not the best approach to get people to listen to you.
Right, no.
Nobody told these people the situation.
Right.
Nobody said, okay, there's a possible epidemic. We have to be really careful not to spread it because there's not enough medicine to, vaccinate the whole town. So we're just going to hang tight and wait for the medicine. We're all going to get treated, and then we can go home.
Right.
But no, nobody explained anything to that. They just here's a gun, you can't leave. That was terrible.
So Angie, meanwhile, is in a perilous situation. She wakes up to discover she's being flooded in and screams to no avail because there's nobody there.
There's nobody there. They're all at the hospital.
Julia goes to try to interrogate Bill, but he's delusional. He does mention a cabin, and Alice wants to know what she's doing out of bed. Julia says he might know where Peter is, which means absolutely nothing to Alice. And basically she realizes that and explains the situation. Alice orders her back to bed. Jim and Barbie go to the pharmacy, which has been raided, so there's nothing to get there.
Yeah, it's completely ransacked. There's nothing useful there at all. Not good.
Alice continues to take care of patients. Caroline asks about her insulin. She thinks she has a few days' supply left, and basically Caroline says she's going to go and get some food and make her eat it. Linda and her teacher are both in trouble with only one dose of antibiotics left. Her teacher tells her to give it to Linda, and she will wait for the other doses. Well, we know how that's going to work out.
We know how that's going to work out, and I'm pretty sure Alice knew very well that these two are both out of time. They don't have time to wait for Jim to get back. And Alice tells Nurse Adams to go ahead and give Linda the dose.
And I think that's the correct decision because Linda's younger, and I mean, I don't mean to say this in a way that's derogatory, but Linda is actually more valuable than Mrs. Roy in the situation.
Mrs. Moore said that. She was like, the town needs you.
Right.
So
she's fully well aware of this, which is why she gives up her dose and is a very brave person for doing so because she pretty much knows that this is a death sentence.
I mean, there was a chance that they were going to get the medicine in time and save her, but it wasn't a sure thing. That's for sure.
Right. So Julia goes to Junior, wanting to get let out. She tells him that her husband might be in trouble, and he seems to care, which is interesting. And she mentions the cabin, which Junior's like, oh, you mean the one I found Barbie in? And despite this conversation, and by the way, Juliet calls him James in this scene.
Right, because remember they bonded in the
last
cement
episode.
tunnels.
Right, which kind of builds on that, which, I wasn't overall thrilled with those scenes last week, but this is like a continuation and building blocks of that relationship.
Right, it's kind of double folded. So he does care about her a little bit because they bonded, because she's showing him some care that he doesn't get from his father, from anybody.
Right.
And also, he's trying to stick it to Barbie.
Right.
By trying to lead her to whatever the heck Barbie's doing. Because he knows Barbie's up to no good, and he wants him to get found out.
Right.
So he tells her where the cabin is. He's not going to let her leave.
Right.
But he tells her all about the cabin. And you know what? My note here is, this is her journalistic instinct, kicking in really dangerously. Because whatever's out there to find out still going to be there after you get the antibiotics.
Right.
It's really dangerous for her to just be like, I'm leaving. I got to go figure out what happened to my husband. Right. When we know she's sick and she could spread this disease.
Right.
And she doesn't even stop to think about that. She's just like, I'm leaving. And it's not even about her own safety. It's about, you could spread this and end up killing the whole freaking town because of it.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's perfectly within her character. So she goes to her husband's office and gets his ID badge. And presumably, that's the way of getting out. She basically goes out the back.
Yeah, it's like a restricted exit to leave the clinic. And she uses his key card to get out.
Jim and Barbie drive, and Jim realizes that Lester probably has the antibiotics. I'm not sure what exactly brought him to that conclusion, but...
Barbie says they're looking for a big truck or a van, something that could hold all of that medicine. And Jim's like, what about a hearse?
Right.
And I think maybe it's something Coggins said in that spiel this morning at the Dome.
Maybe.
Made him realize that. And he knows he's crazy.
Yeah.
And a drug addict, and he's not at the hospital, so...
So, meanwhile, Lester's burning and dumping the antibiotics. And Jim and Barbie end up upon him, he's saying he's honoring God's plan because they are supposed to die. And Jim and Barbie end up stopping him. So that's the end of that.
And they retrieve all the medicine that was stolen from the pharmacy.
Well, not all, because it seems like he successfully burned some of it.
It looked like there was a lot still in the curse.
Linda, meanwhile, seems to recover. Her teacher informs her of this, that she's not getting better. I don't understand what that means, but okay, so
They talk about Junior.
Yes, saying that it's comforting that him holding a shotgun is comforting. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is she's saying that she can't believe that Junior holding a shotgun is comforting when a couple years back it wouldn't have been.
Right,
And-
meaning he's
yeah.
a screw-up. She knows this because was his teacher.
Yeah.
And she's like, look how far he's come.
Right.
He's doing something good.
And I'm not sure that's really in evidence up to this point.
No, I mean, also she's kind of like dying in a bed, so
Right.
she doesn't even really know what's going on out
Right.
there.
Yeah. But also she mentions the fact that the same applies to Linda herself.
Right. Because I guess Linda and Junior were kind of similar, all the way back in 3rd grade. She was their 3rd grade teacher.
Right.
So it's been a while.
Yes. Things have changed.
But yeah, she kind of marvels at Linda being the sheriff, and Linda's just kind of like, oh, it's not really. Like, I
Right.
had, it was Duke. And
Right.
she says, don't sell yourself short.
Mm-hmm. And then she dies.
And she dies. She's done. So she was there just long enough to convince Linda that her and Junior are both doing great.
Right.
Which is a really bad idea to put in Linda's head.
Yeah, I think this is the idea. I think based on this and what happens later, this is how we get Linda to start thinking of Junior as a possible deputy.
That Junior, is kind of like
Yeah.
her. Only,
Yeah.
she's a couple years older than him.
Right.
But he's kind of in the same path as her, potentially, is
Right.
what she's seeing.
So Julia goes to the cabin, discovers it a wreck, and then starts looking around. Linda hears a commotion outside. People try to rush to Junior. He fires off a warning shot as people are trying to get out. Linda happens upon the scene and is like, Junior, what are you doing? And Junior, seeing her, suddenly decides to change tactics and make...
So there was a deleted scene that
Okay.
goes right here.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you about that.
Okay.
Because this is where we have another character who doesn't actually speak in
Okay.
the version that ever aired.
All right.
He was only in a he's there, but he only spoke in a deleted scene. And this is Mr. Cunningham. He's played by Robin Robertson. He was in one episode of Sleepy Hollow.
Robert Robertson. Who's that?
Robert
Was that?
Robertson. His parents.
His parents did not like him, I guess. But anyway.
So he's the man standing in a plaid shirt next to Ollie.
Okay.
So in the deleted scene, before Junior talks to Ollie, he tells Mr. Cunningham, he asks him if he remembers when Junior broke his window with the baseball when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Cunningham says, yeah, I remember that. And that was cut.
Okay, so that line was cut specifically?
Yeah, that whole interaction.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think something else might have been cut, because we also have an uncredited listing for young Junior in this episode, and I don't recall seeing a Junior flashback.
No, there was nothing like that in this episode.
So young Junior's played by James Alcorn. He supposedly is in this episode. He's also in episodes 5 and 6. He has three uncredited listings.
Okay.
James Alcorn was in 2 episodes of Mr. Mercedes, We're the Millers, and 2 episodes of Revolution.
Interesting.
And I'm thinking what happened is during that whole, do you remember when I broke your window with a baseball
Yeah.
conversation? There was at one point maybe a visual of young Junior actually doing that.
Possibly, that would make
Or
sense.
at some point something must have been cut with young Junior in it, because he's listed as being in this episode.
Gotcha.
And we don't see him. So, but I do remember we do see him eventually, so it must be next week, according to these credits. But after that is when now Junior, it's supposed to be his second person he's talking to is Ollie. And it's funny because I do kind of feel like I remember him talking to a bunch of people in this scene. Like, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? And maybe that's in the book.
Maybe.
Maybe that's what I'm remembering.
Perhaps.
Because you know what happens when you read a book after you've watched a series? Is you picture, like, the actors from the series
Yes.
in your head while you're reading the book, and then
Yeah.
you have no idea what scenes you've ever actually seen or you've just imagined in your
Right.
head.
No. Yeah.
So maybe that's what I feel like I remember him talking to multiple people at some point in this fashion.
Yeah, probably.
It also kind of reminds me of a scene from Sullivan's Crossing, from the season 2 finale, when they're at the auction.
Okay, yeah.
And
There were no shotguns.
no shotguns, but Maggie was saying to everybody, do you remember when my dad did this?
Right, yeah, okay.
And when he did this, and when that happened, trying to get the community together. And I remember at that point thinking it reminded me of this scene, and thinking that it was multiple people that were said. But really, in this scene, the only person he talks to is Ollie.
Yeah. So he basically says they have to fight through this together. And, he's a member of this town. And he puts down the shotgun and walks away. And then Ollie wanders over to the shotgun, and then just decides to turn around and sit back down.
Yes, nobody leaves. So Junior has successfully now convinced them that they need to stay.
He's and he could have done this from the start.
Right.
But, I mean,
just been like, hey guys, we got a situation.
I'm not necessarily going to crap on Junior for that because he's young and dumb. And, he is a terrible person. But that's besides the point. Basically, Jim sent him in here with no instructions and no backup because he didn't, speak on his behalf.
Yeah, Jim definitely should have come in and talked to the room.
Right. But he does, he actually successfully channels his dad here and calms the situation down. Which, for all you can say about Jim, and you can say plenty of bad things about him, he is good at that. He is good at, settling things down.
Sure.
And, getting the town
Which is why he's, in the position of power he's in.
Yeah.
He's a used car salesman.
Yeah.
He knows how to work a crowd.
Right. Meanwhile, Julia is poking around the cabin. She finds some papers, and then she ends up falling
She
over.
makes a realization.
Yeah.
She says, oh, Peter, and we'll learn later what the heck she found out. But she's in trouble. She collapses. She's in this cabin by herself. Not looking good for Julia.
No. Nori, meanwhile, is taking selfies of herself, and they're Joe and her are completely disconnected from anything else that's going on in this hospital.
Yeah, because they were told, wait in this room while we do your blood work. They have no idea what the heck's going on out there.
So Joe comes back with food. He does mention the fact that it's a madhouse out there. He doesn't really know what is going on exactly.
He brought her a sandwich. I'm not sure where they got sandwiches at, but he found food somewhere in this building.
They're peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And Nori's like, well, what happens when we run out of those? And Joe's like, you know what? It's not going to come to that. We will get out of this dome eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's right.
Right.
But...
I mean, he's trying to be optimistic.
I would be worried about food.
Yes.
We watch a lot of television, though.
We do.
We'd be prepared in this kind of situation.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, in a survival situation, I'm kind of useless. Just throw me at the zombies.
But we would know first order of business is, gather your supplies and start rationing.
Yes. So, Nori wants to touch again to see what happens, to see if they have another seizure. And Joe suggests filming it. Joe and Nori end up setting up. They set up their camera. They kneel down.
And why did they not wait till there was someone else in the room to do this?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure they want other people to know about this.
Okay, but if you think you're going to have a seizure...
Right.
Somebody else should be there to,
Or maybe put some,
make
padding.
Make sure you're okay.
Yeah. Maybe put some padding and blankets down
maybe
as well.
start laying down
so
you don't fall. And, they wouldn't have had to tell the other person in the room that they're testing it. They just have to touch each other.
Right.
But someone should have been present.
Mm-hmm. So, they touch hands. Nothing seems to happen for a moment, and then they fall over and have a seizure.
Yeah, another pink star seizure.
Yes. Jim comes back with antibiotics. Junior claims there was no problems whatsoever, but that's going to be undermined by the new hole in the ceiling that Jim is eventually going to see. So, Angie, meanwhile, is panicking, and it seems like there's not enough... how long has she been in here for now?
Right?
It seems like there should be a lot more water.
Yeah, the water's... We're supposed to believe that, the water's going to take over this place, and it's not.
Right. It's, still up to her ankles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, Barbie goes to talk to Phil and wants to know what Julia knows. He ends up kicking his chair in a means to intimidate him, and he's gotten the antibiotics at this point. Phil thinks he's gone.
Peter thinks Peter skipped town.
Yeah. And he's sorry that he's not going to get his money back, which, he knows that he's never going to get his money back.
Yeah, it's not about that at this point. But apparently a month ago, Peter had asked Phil if he knew any hitmen.
Right.
Important plot point there.
Yes.
And then he sold his car to him for a steal, and this is when Phil gave him, the tip that maybe he should just skip town.
Right.
So he's assuming that he was listened to.
Right. And Phil does not know what he said to Julia as he was way out there. Julia, meanwhile, is hallucinating in the cabin, and we see Peter's hallucination.
She sees a vision of Peter. Yeah. This is our reprisal by R. Keith Harris.
And after that, Nori and Joe wake up. Joe looks at the video. He's like, oh, I'll just rewind it, which is kind of a weird thing to say.
It's a really weird thing to say.
Right, about a video on a phone. You don't usually say that.
That's 2013. I don't know. How... Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, he basically he rewinds, watches the video, and at one point, Joe shushes the camera, and he has no memory of doing that.
Yeah, and it was really kind of creepy.
Yeah.
He sits up and does the shushing motion with his hands, like, to themselves, because they know they're the ones watching it.
But it seems to indicate they aren't supposed to tell anyone about what they heard and what they are experiencing.
Because the dome doesn't want them to.
Right.
That's quite a conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Barbie asks Junior about where Julia is. He takes the opportunity to bust his stones, and only gets convinced to hand over his truck when Barbie says she will die out there unless he finds her.
And it'll be his fault.
Right, because he's the one to let her out.
He was supposed to make sure nobody left.
Right. And I don't know that that's totally fair, because how is Junior going to prevent her from going to Peter's office and getting his badge?
Yeah, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But also it is playing on both the fact that he wants to be, he doesn't want anyone to think that he did a bad job.
Right.
And also
he does actually care about Julia.
He kind of cares about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the crisis seems to have passed. Linda praises Junior. And Jim seems...
To Jim. So
she
tells Jim, like, hey, he did a great job.
Right.
Things could have gotten really bad today, but Junior stepped up.
And Jim suggests a career in law enforcement. And Junior smiles, and then as he's walking away, he looks really sinister.
Yeah, he has this very sinister smile on his face. Like, he thinks, that's a great idea.
Right.
What am I trying to say? The shoe doesn't fall.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree?
Sure, that's
or
it.
Or the apple does fall far from the tree? Or no, you're right. It was right the way the first time.
He's a lot like his dad, is what I'm trying to say.
Julia wakes up and asks if Barbie is the one that saved her life. She learned, and interestingly enough, Barbie doesn't answer this question. He doesn't say anything. She learned that they are broke. Peter emptied their accounts, and he asks, what were you guys into? And Barbie, he's clearly uncomfortable here, but he begins to tell her the story about how after he left the military, he was getting side jobs, and then he ended up an enforcer for bookies.
And one of the side jobs he mentions is a line cook, which I bring that up because that's what he was doing in the novel.
Right.
He was a line cook at Rose's place.
And she learns that Peter was a gambler, though she's kind of in denial about it.
Yeah, she's like, he never gambled.
Right. And then he ends up playing Peter's message to him to prove what he's saying. But when she asks, where is he now, he lies.
Right.
Now, why does he do that? There's three different possibilities.
Well, he doesn't want her to know that he killed her husband, obviously.
Is it that simple? Is it just as simple as, he doesn't want to implicate himself in a murder? Or is it because he's trying to shield her from the truth and trying to, protect her feelings?
I mean, that's one and the same. If she finds out that her husband's dead,
right,
it's really bad for Barbie, because he's the one who freaking killed him.
Right.
And, also we already have this really convenient narrative that Phil set up that maybe he skipped town.
Right.
So it's really easy for him to be like, I went to the cabin, he wasn't there.
Right.
He must have skipped out on both of us. Oops.
Well, either way, this doesn't help him very much. On the one hand, he's not implicated in a murder. On the other hand, Julia basically says, look, I don't care about your apologies. You lied to me. Get out.
Right, because he lied about not knowing Peter at all.
I'm going to point out the fact that this is a rational and normal response to this situation and finding out what she found here, which is a contrast to later on when she's suddenly sleeping with him.
Right, but you know what else I just realized? Barbie shouldn't have even frickin' known that it was Peter he was meeting, because he's not supposed to know what this dude looked like until he met him.
Right.
And he was using a fake name. He was meeting Mr. Smith, and if he never showed up, he'd have no idea what Mr. Smith looked like.
Right.
And he'd have no idea that was Peter Shumway.
Right. So, I mean, I think he didn't know it was Peter Shumway until after he saw the picture on the mantle.
Exactly, but why in his narrative that he never showed up would he even know?
Yeah, I guess so. So basically...
I mean, Julia doesn't know that he didn't know what he looked like, but...
So, yeah, like I said, this is a normal response from Julia here that will be contrasted from the less than normal response later on.
He does, prove that he's a good guy.
Okay, so here's the thing.
And helpful, and they do have a connection, and, they're kind of in a dire situation.
I see all that. I'm not saying that Barbie is an irredeemable person. I think we do basically learn that he's a good guy. I'm not really condemning him for these actions. So I can forgive him. I'm not so sure that Julia should be able to do that and start sleeping with this guy.
I think she realizes that it was her husband's fault, not Barbie's, for everything that happened.
Still, and then you shack up with the guy that murdered your husband.
Well, she already liked him before she knew that, so...
I mean, I guess, but...
It's television, okay? Somebody's got to sleep with somebody.
Right. And it shouldn't be Junior with anybody. But anyway.
No.
So Joe and Nori lied to Alice, saying that they were just basically making out and stuff.
And they had no more seizures.
Right.
Listen, if I'm having freaking seizures and whispering to the camera, I want somebody to know.
Right.
Like, why are you hiding this? What do you think you're going to gain by nobody knowing what's happening?
I don't know. Maybe they think that, like, somehow the Dome was responsible for this and that the Dome doesn't want them to know, so they shouldn't tell anybody.
I mean, that is the case, but why would they think that?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't really answer that. So Joe offers them a place to stay, instead of going back to Rose's place.
Yeah, because they're staying in a guest room at Rose's, and they're not comfortable there. And Joe's like, I got a whole house. My whole family's gone, so come stay with me.
And they, of course, end up accepting this offer. Barbie ends up leaving Julia's house and basically takes one last look at Peter Shumway's picture on her mantle by the fireplace. Caroline, meanwhile, is looking for insulin, and Alice is confident that they will get out of this place and that they don't need the insulin.
Yeah, so Carolyn takes the insulin out of the fridge to swipe it.
Right.
And Alice makes her put it back.
I think she's out of her mind. I think if she only has a week's supply of insulin...
A couple days, she said.
A couple of days, she should be taking this insulin.
I mean, okay, so a few things. She doesn't want to take it all, because there's other people that need it.
Fair enough.
That's fair.
Take some of it?
She should have taken some of it.
Yes.
My note here is, since she's the only doctor in town, technically, shouldn't she be in charge of dispensing all the meds now anyways?
Right. I mean,
like,
basically...
all of the meds? Like...
if that's really true and she's the only person who's capable of handling a medical crisis, then she should prioritize herself and make sure that she doesn't die.
Right.
Because she is actually important to this town.
But, she's someone who needs insulin, so you need to be on the list of somebody who gets some of it.
Right.
Don't just leave it in the fridge so the next person can come steal it all.
Right, yeah. You're assuming that everybody else here is going to have the same kind of morals that you are.
Right.
And that's not a good assumption in this situation. So anyway, Junior and Linda are at the station. He comforts her about Mrs. Moore. She thinks that he has a good heart and offers him a badge. Now, like I said, this is a pretty good episode for setting up Junior's character, and we know he does not belong having a badge, and they do actually continue on in season 1 with him. It basically being obvious that he should not have a badge, especially with that brother situation. So again, I think mostly they handle Junior well in season 1, despite some of my issues.
Yeah.
When we get beyond that, though, it's a whole different ballgame. But we'll get there.
But yeah, eventually. I really like where these characters are at right now.
Yeah.
And, with Linda really thinking, like, I need deputies. I have nobody. And I think he can handle it. And I think he is pretty good. He did a great job today.
Yeah.
Because she watched him diffuse that room. Now, arguably, the whole reason the room was worked up was because of him in the first place.
Yes.
But she was out of it for that. She didn't see that part.
Right, yeah. Also, there's the whole kidnapping women and trapping them in bomb shelters.
Right, but nobody knows about that.
Right, yes.
Yet.
Right.
But.
Yep, okay. So, Jim gets home and finds Lester on his porch. And he's basically decided to give up his share of the profits for their dirty business. Lester thinks that Jim has doomed them all, and Lester himself is trying to repent for his sins.
And he tells Jim he's going to pay for what he did.
Yes. Angie, meanwhile, is still sitting in a lot of water, the same amount of water she's been sitting in all day. It should be much, much more long than that, given the way that...
I guess there is some drainage.
I guess so. She screams for help. Jim ends up hearing it and goes to investigate and finds her, and he looks at her dumbfounded, and that is where the episode
And we're left kind of not knowing if it's a good thing or not for her that he found her.
Right.
Because we don't know yet who is Big Jim.
Right.
We know he did some shady business shit, but is he capable of, like, contributing to this? We don't know at this moment.
Right.
Now, where it's gonna go... And this is where, we could have solved all of this by him stepping up and maybe,
selling Junior down the river?
Exactly. Getting that badge taken away from him?
Mm-hmm.
But no.
No.
But no. Now, comparing to the book, we do get a lot of really crappy teenagers running the police station. And we don't have any good, reason other than Big Jim points them. So I do like that, we got this whole Barbie, or not Barbie, I always mix them up, their names. Junior was put in, on good assumptions. And
right.
Jim didn't appoint him. I think that's a really important thing, is
right.
Linda made this decision. Now,
right.
Jim kind of put the idea out there.
Yes.
But she's the one who handed him the badge. It's not that Jim's just taking over.
Yeah. All of that is very true. And, they do a good job of setting up the fact that Linda can be fooled by this person, thinking that he's a good guy. He's going to prove himself not to be, for this season at least. And basically, how he deals with the whole people who end up attacking Angie.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole thing. And then him eventually, does the whole battle with Allie happen this season? Yeah, it does, actually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he ends up taking the side of Allie Dinsmore.
Yeah, we last see Ollie in episode 8, so it's happening quickly.
Gotcha.
The next few episodes.
Okay.
We had one more credited listing for today, and that was a townsperson. I have no idea where we met her, so that's why I didn't shout her out when we met her. Played by Elena Varela. She was in one episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, one episode of Scream the Series. And I've got some uncredited people. We had Patience. We had Shannon. A lot of people playing Patience this week. Shannon Blackridge. She was in 2 episodes of One Tree Hill and the movie Tammy. This is the only time we see her. We have someone who was in episode 1, but I didn't go over their credits at that time, and that's Sherry Bowling. In episode 1, she was a diner patron. In this episode, she's a patient. She was in one episode of Revolution and a 2013 film called Southern Iron.
You know something about Revolution, that series? Because it keeps coming up.
It keeps coming up. It must just be something that was filmed in this area.
Gotcha.
I have no idea
Nothing that you're familiar with?
No, it's just one that, was easy to pick out.
Gotcha.
Because it did keep coming up. We had an orderly who we're going to see again next week, played by Adrian Eugene Graham. He was in 2 episodes of Fatal Attraction, 1 episode of Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow must have been filmed near there, too, because that one keeps popping up. A patient, Layla Lottering. She was in Tammy, and she was a double on 4 episodes of Sleepy Hollow. And this is her only episode. Another patient whose only episode it was Karen Molina. She was in 1 episode of Sleepy Hollow and The Conjuring. Another patient was Joanne Mason. She was in 10 episodes of Beckenfield. I'm not sure what that is. A patient who's going to appear again a couple more times throughout this series, James Nass. So I guess he didn't die.
That's good.
He was in Mr. Mercedes and The Taking of Deborah Logan.
Okay, that's another Stephen King adaptation.
We had a sick child, played by Ethan Rosario. He was in The Valet and 1 episode of Revolution. Nurse Beth, this is the only time we see that nurse, so I don't know what happened to her. She's played by Quincy Villanueva. She was in the 2012 movie Scrooge and Marley and 2 episodes of Boss.
Okay.
This is an interesting credit. Or uncredited listing, rather. He was in episode 1 as a firefighter.
Okay.
In this episode, he was military. So he switched sides.
Oh, okay.
He's no longer a firefighter who went to Westlake. Now he's part of the military.
Gotcha.
So I think that was bad.
That's quite a career change.
Yeah, that was some bad background casting. And we're going to see him again next week. I'm not sure in which capacity. He also was a stand-in on this series for episodes 10, 12, and 13. And then he reprises as stand-in in season 3. And I don't know who he stands in for because I couldn't see a picture of him, so I don't know what he looks like.
Right.
But he stands in for somebody later in the series. And this is Ben Yemba.
Gotcha.
And he was in episode 1, like I said, but we didn't cover his credits, so let me do that. He was a stand-in in 8 episodes of 6 and 9 episodes of Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, okay.
And reprising, we have a couple people, Rochelle Alclough Carolyn Kahn, David Pasqua, and Will Smith all came back. And that's that.
All right. Do we have anything else to say before concluding?
That's all I got. I read my list of names.
All right.
It was a good episode for developing where we're at in this story, and like I said, I'm still on board at this point, and worried for Angie.
Yes. Well, I mean, I know she's gonna be fine for this season, but after that,
I'm talking about, as first pretending we don't know what happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm very worried about Angie because she's hot.
Okay.
And because she's a nice person, and I don't want to see anything bad happen.
I meant more like she's got at the person whose mercy she's at right now is Jim.
Right. Who's really flexible, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Although at this point, do we know how bad he can be?
Well, he hasn't yet.
All we really know is that he was involved in this drug thing, which so was Duke. So
at this point in the series, he hasn't started
we know
actively murdering people.
He's kind of an asshole father. I think that's all we really know about him
yet.
Yeah. It's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah. Like I said, he's not actively murdering people at this point, so we don't know that he's that bad of a person.
That's going to happen soon.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
Right. All right. We'd like to hear from you. What did you think of this podcast? What did you think of this episode? Stacie, can we reach at?
I can reach on Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at TV and Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join one of my Core Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee. You can join the Core Productions membership starting at 99 cents a month. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video as well as subscribing to the channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Core Productions signing off.